Publisher's Preface by Harry Graham. LibriVox.org. Gentle reader, who so patiently have waited For such viands as your poet can provide, Which, as critics have occasionally stated, Must be trying to a delicate inside. Once again are opportunities afforded Of a banquet, or déjeuner at least. Once again your toleration is rewarded By a literary feast. You may think that Rudyard Kipling's work is stronger, Or that Chaucer's may be rather more mature. Byron's lyrics are indubitably longer, Robert Browning's just a trifle more obscure. But 'tis certain that no poems are politer, Or more fitted for perusal in the home, Than the verses of the unassuming writer Of this memorable tome. Austin Dobson is a daintier performer, Andrew Lang is far more scholarly and wise. Mr. Swinburne can, of course, be somewhat warmer, Alfred Austin more amusing if he tries. But there's no one in the world, and well you know it, Who can emulate the bard of whom we speak, For the literary methods of our poet Are admittedly unique. Though he shows no sort of penitence At breaking every rule of English grammar and style, Not a rhyme is too atrocious for his making, Not a metre for his purpose is too vile. Though his treatment is essentially destructive, And his taste a thing that no one can admire, There is something incontestably seductive In the music of his lyre. Gentle reader, some apologies are needed For depositing this volume on your desk, Since the author has undoubtedly exceeded All the limits of legitimate burlesque, And we look with very genuine affection To a public who for better or worse Will relieve us of this villainous collection Of abominable verse. End of the Publisher's Preface. This recording is in the public domain.
Eve by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Debbie Baker Robinson. Eve. I always loved to picture Eve, whatever captious critics say, as one who was, as I believe, the nicest woman of her day. Attractive to the outward view, and such a perfect lady, too. Unselfish, that one can't dispute, recalling her intense delight When she acquired some novel fruit in giving all her friends a bite. Her very troubles she would share with those who happened to be there. Her wardrobe, though extremely small, sufficed a somewhat simple need. She was, if anything at all, a trifle underdressed indeed, and never visited a play in headgear known as matinee. Possessing but a single beau, with only one affaire de coeur, she promptly married, as we know, the man who first proposed to her, not for his title or his pelf, but simply for his own sweet self. He loved her madly at first sight, his callow heart was quite upset. He thought her nearly, if not quite, the sweetest soul he had ever met. She found him charming, for a man, and so their young romance began. Their wedding was a trifle tame, a purely family affair. No guests were asked, no pressmen came to interview the happy pair. No crowds of curious strangers bored them, the Eden Journal quite ignored them. They had the failings of their class, the faults and foibles of the youthful. She was inquisitive, alas, and he was not exactly truthful. But never was there man or woman so truly, so intensely human. And hand in hand from day to day they lived and labored, man and wife, together hewed their common way along the rugged path of life, remaining, though the seasons passed, friends, lovers to the very last. So, side by side, they shared, these two, the sorrow and the joys of living, the man devoted, tender, true, the woman patient and forgiving. Their common toil, their common weather, but drew them closelier still together. And if they ever chanced to grieve, enduring loss or suffering pain, You may be certain it was Eve brought comfort to their hearts again. If they were happy, well I know it was the woman made them so. And though the anthropologist may mention in his tactless way that Adam's weaknesses exist among our modern men today, in women we may still perceive the virtues of their mother Eve. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Lady Godiva by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Nemo. In the old town of Coventry, so people say, dwelt a peer who was utterly lacking in pity, universally loath for the rigorous way that he burdened the rates of the city. By his merciless methods of petty taxation, the poor were reduced to the verge of starvation. But the Earl had a wife whom the people adored for her kindness of heart even more than her beauty, and her pitiless lord she besought and implored to remit this extortionate duty. But he answered, "My dear, pray reflect at your leisure. What you deem a duty, to me is a pleasure." At the heart of her spouse she continued to storm, and she closed her entreaties one day by exclaiming, "If you take off the tax, I will gladly perform any task that you like to be naming." "Well, if that be the case," said the nobleman, "I have a good mind just to test you, my Lady Godiva. To your wishes, my dear, I will straight acquiesce, on the single condition, I give you fair warning, that you ride through the city at noon in the dress that you wear in your bath of a morning." "Very well," she replied, "be it so, though you drive a hard bargain, my lord," said the Lady Godiva. So she slipped off her gown, and her shoulders lay bare, gleaming white like the moon on Ionian fountains. When about them she loosened her curtain of hair, 'twas like night coming over the mountains, and she blushed 'neath the veil of her wonderful tresses, as blushes the morn 'neath the sun's first caresses. Then she went to the stable and saddled her steed, who erected his ears till he looked like a rabbit. He was somewhat surprised, as he might be indeed, at the lady's unusual habit, but allowed her to mount in the masculine way, for he couldn't say no, and he wouldn't say nay. So she rode through the town in the heat of the sun, for the weather was, luckily, warm as the tropics, and the people all drew down their blinds except one, on the staff of the local town topics. Such misconduct produced, in the eyes of this vile one, a cataract nearly as large as the Nile one. Then Godiva returned, and the Earl had to yield, and the paralyzed pressman dictated his cable. The tax was remitted, the bells were repealed, and the horse was returned to the stable, while banners were waved from each possible quarter, except from the flat of the stricken reporter. Now the moral is this, if I've fathomed the tale, though it needs a more delicate pen to explain it: you can get whatsoever you want without fail, if you'll sacrifice all to obtain it. You should try to avoid unconventional capers, and be sure you don't write for society papers. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Miss Mary Corelli by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Carolyn. Miss Marie Corelli. A very woman among men. Her paeans, sung in every quarter, almost persuade Le Gallienne to go and get his hair cut shorter. When Kipling hears her trumpet note, he longs to don a petticoat. Her praises sung by old or young, from happy Hampstead to Hoboken, where'er old England's mother tongue is ungrammatically spoken, in that supremely simple set which loves the penny novelette. When Anglo-Saxon peoples kneel before their literary idol, it makes all rival authors feel depressed and almost suicidal. They cannot reach within a mile of her sublime suburban style. Her modest, unobtrusive ways, in sunny Stratford's guide-books graven, her brilliance lighting with its rays the birthplace of the Swan of Avon, must cause the bard as deep a pain as his resemblance to Hall Caine. Mere ordinary mortals ask, with no desire for picking quarrels, who gave her the congenial task of judging other people's morals, who bade her flay her fellow men with such a frankly feline pen. And one may seek and seek in vain the social set she loves to mention, those offspring of her fertile brain, those creatures of her fond invention. She is, or so it would appear, unlucky in her friends, poor dear. For though like her they feel the sway of claptrap sentimental glamour, and frequently like her give way to lapses from our English grammar, the victims of her diatribes are not the least as she describes. To restaurants they seldom go, just for the sake of overeating, while ladies don't play bridge, you know, entirely for the sake of cheating. And husbands can be quite nice men, and wives are faithful now and then. Were she to mingle with her ink a little milk of human kindness, she would not join, I dare to think, to chronic social colour-blindness, an outlook bigoted and narrow as that of some provincial sparrow. But still perhaps it might affect her literary circulation if she were tempted to neglect her talent for vituperation, since work of this peculiar kind delights the groundling's curious mind, for while of course from day to day her popularity increases, as in an artless sort of way she tears society to pieces, her sense of humour, so they tell us, makes even Alfred Austin jealous. Yet even bumpkins by and by, such is the spread of education, may view with cold phlegmatic eye the fruits of her imagination, and learn to temper their devotion with slight if adequate emotion. Dear Miss Corelli, should your eyes peruse this page, 'tis my ambition, be sure that I apologize in any suitable position for having weakly imitated the style that you yourself created. I cannot fancy to attain to heights of personal invective which you, with subtler pen and brain, have learned to render so effective. I follow dimly in your trail. Forgive me, therefore, if I fail. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Mrs. Mary Baker Eddy by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org. Have you a pain all down your back? A feeling of intense prostration? Are you anemic for the lack of proper circulation, with bloodshot eye and hand unsteady? Pray send at once for Mrs. Eddy. The saint and prophetess is she of what is known as Christian Science, and you can lean on Mrs. E. with absolute reliance, for she will shortly make it plain that there is no such thing as pain. The varied ailments on your list which cause you such extreme vexation are nothing more, she will insist, than mere imagination. 'Tis so with illness or disease, nothing exists except her fees. A friend of mine had not been taught this doctrine, I regret to say. He fell downstairs, or so he thought, and broke his neck one day. Had Mrs. Eddy come along, she could have shown him he was wrong. She could have told him, or his wraith, that stairs and necks have no existence, that persons with sufficient faith can fall from any distance, and that he wasn't in the least what local papers called deceased. Of ills to which the flesh is heir she is decidedly disdainful, but once, or so her friends declare, her teeth became so painful that though she knew they couldn't be, she had them taken out to see. Afflictions of the lame or halt, which other people view with terror, to her denote some moral fault, some form of mental error. While doctors probe or amputate, she simply heals you while you wait. My brother, whom you may have seen, possessed a limp, a very slight one. His leg, the left, had always been much shorter than the right one, but Mrs. Eddy came this way, and, well, just look at him to-day. At healing, she had grown so deft that when she finished with my brother, his crippled leg, I mean the left, was longer than the other, and now he's praying day and night for faith to lengthen out the right. So let it be our chief concern to set diseases at defiance, contriving, as the truths we learn of so-called Christian Science, to live from illnesses exempt, or else to die in the attempt. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Mrs. Grundy by Harry Graham, read for LibriVox.org by Patrick Wallace. When lovely woman stoops to smoke, a vice in which she often glories, or sees the somewhat doubtful joke in after-dinner stories, who is it to her bedroom rushes to hide the fervour of her blushes? When Susan's skirt's a trifle short, or Mary's manner rather skittish, who is it with a fretful snort, so typically British, emits prolonged and startled cries, suggestive of a pained surprise? Who is it, tell me in effect, who loves to centre her attentions on all who wilfully neglect society's conventions, and seems eternally imbued with saponaceous rectitude? 'Tis Mrs. Grundy, deaf and blind to anything the least romantic, combining with a narrow mind a point of view pedantic, since no one in the world can stop her from thinking everything improper. The picture or the marble bust at any public exhibition evokes her unconcealed disgust and rouses her suspicion if human forms are shown to us in puris naturalibus. The bear, in any sense or shape, she looks upon as wrong or faulty. Piano legs she likes to drape, if they are too décolleté. For long with horror she has viewed the naked truth, for being nude. On modern manners that efface the formal modes of introduction, she is at once prepared to place the very worst construction, and frowns suspicious and sardonic on friendships that are termed platonic. The English restaurants must close at 12 o'clock at night on Sunday to suit, or so we may suppose, the taste of Mrs. Grundy. On weekdays, 30 minutes later, ejected guests revile the waiter. A sense of humour she would vote the sign of mental dissipations. She scorns whatever might promote the gaiety of nations. Of lawful fun she seems no fonder than of the noxious double entendre. And if you wish to make her blench and snap her teeth together tightly, say something in Parisian French, and close one optic slightly. Rien ne va plus, enfin alors. She leaves the room and slams the door. Oh, Mrs. Grundy, do, I beg, to false conclusions cease from rushing, and learn to name the human leg without profusely blushing. No longer be, don't think me rude, that unalluring thing, the prude. No more patrol the world, I pray, in search of trifling social errors. Let, what will Mrs. Grundy say, no longer have its terrors. Leave diatribe and objurgation to Mrs. Chant and Carrie Nation. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Mrs. Christopher Columbus by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Diana Schmidt. The bride grows pale beneath her veil. The matron for the nonce is dumb, who listens to the tragic tale of Mrs. Christopher Columb, who lived and died, so says report, a widow of the herbal sort. Her husband upon canvas wings would brave the ocean tempest tossed. He had a cult for finding things which nobody had ever lost. And Mrs. C. grew almost frantic when he discovered the Atlantic. But nothing she could do or say would keep her Christopher at home. Without delay he sailed away across what poets called the foam. While neighbors murmured, "What a shame!" and wished their husbands did the same, he ventured on the highest seas that reared their heads above the bar, knowing the compass and the quays like any operatic star. And funny friends who watched him do so would call him Robinson Crusoe, but Mrs. C. remained indoors and poked the fire and wound the clocks, amused the children, scrubbed the floors, or darned her absent husband's socks. For she was far too sweet and wise to darn the great explorer's eyes. And when she chanced to look around at all the couples she had known, and realized how few had found a home as peaceful as her own, she saw how pleasant it may be to wed a chronic absentee. Her husband's absence she enjoyed, nor ever asked him where he went, thinking him harmlessly employed discovering some continent. Had he been always in, no doubt, some day she would have found him out, and so he daily left her side to travel o'er the ocean far, and she who, like the bard, had tried to hitch her wagon to a star, though she was harnessed to a comet, got lots of satisfaction from it. To him, returning from the west, she proved a perfect antidote, who loosed his armor, beef compressed, and sprayed his automobile throat. His health she kept a jealous eye on, and played Peruna to his lion, and when she got him home alone, and so could wear the jewels rare, which Isabella, Queen of Spain, entrusted to her husband's care. Her monetary wealth was far beyond the dreams of caviar. A melancholy thing it is, how few have known or understood the manifold advantages of such herbaceous widowhood. What is it ruins married lives but husbands, not to mention wives? O wedded couples of today, pray take these principles to heart, and copy the Columbian way of living happily apart. And so to you, at any rate, shall marriage be a blessed state. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Dame Rumor by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Nemo. I should like to remark that Dame Rumor is the most unalluring of jades. She has little or no sense of humor, and her fables are worse than George Ade's. Or rather, I mean, if the reader prefers, that the fables of Ade are much better than hers. Her appearance imbues one with loathing, from her jaundiced, malevolent eyes to the tinsel she cares to call clothing, which is merely a patchwork of lies, for her garments are such that a child could see through, and her blouse, need I add, is the famed peekaboo. She is wholly devoid of discretion. She is utterly wanting in tact. She is a gossip by trade and profession, and she much prefers fiction to fact. She is seldom veracious and always unkind, and she moves to and fro with the speed of the wind. She resembles the men who, 'tis fabled, tumble into the packing-town vats, who are boiled there and bottled and labelled for the tables of true democrats, pickled souls who are canned for the public to buy, and, like her, have a finger in every pie. With a step that is silent and stealthy, or an ear-splitting clamor and noise, she disturbs the repose of the wealthy, or the peace which the pauper enjoys. And, however securely the doors may be shut, she can always gain access to palace or hut. where the spinsters at tea are collected, her arrival is hailed with delight. She is welcome, adored, and respected in each newspaper office at night, for her presence imprints an original seal on an otherwise commonplace journal or meal. She has nothing in common with virtue, and with truth she was never allied. If she hasn't yet managed to hurt you, it can't be from not having tried, for the poison of adders is under her tongue, and you're lucky indeed if you've never been stung. Are you statesman or author or artist, with a perfectly blameless career? Are your talents and wits of the smartest, and your conscience abnormally clear? He's a saint, says Dame Rumor, and smiles like the Sphinx. He's a hero, she adds. What a pity he drinks. Gentle reader, keep clear of her clutches. Oh, beware of her voice, I entreat. Be you journalist, dowager duchess, or just merely the man in the street, and I beg of you not to encourage a jade, who, if once she is started, can never be stayed. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The Cry of the Children by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Nemo. On the subject of infant education, it has been suggested that more advantageous results might be obtained if, instead of filling children's minds with such nonsense as fairy tales, stories were read to them about Julius Caesar. Oh, my brothers, do you hear the children weeping? Do you note the teardrops tumbling from their eyes? To the schoolhouse they reluctantly are creeping, discontented with the teaching it supplies. At the quality of modern education, little urchins may with justice look askance, since it panders to a child's imagination, and encourages romance. Do you see that toddling baby with a bib on? How his eyes with silent misery are dim? He is yearning for the chance of reading Gibbon, but his teachers give him nothing else but Grimm. What a handicap to infantile ambition! 'Tis enough to make the brightest bantling fume, to be gammoned with an Andrew Lang edition, when he longs for Hume, sweet Hume. See that tiny one, what boredom he expresses, what intolerance his frequent yawns evince. Of the fairy tales where beautiful princesses are delivered from a dragon by a prince, how he curses the pedantic institution where he can't obtain such volumes as Le Cid, or that masterpiece on social evolution by another kind of kid. Do you hear the children weeping, oh my brothers? They are crying for Max Müller and Carlyle. Though Hans Andersen may satisfy their mothers, they are weary of so immature a style, and their time is far too brief to be expended on such nonsense as their rude forefathers read. For they know the days of sentiment are ended, and that chivalry is dead. Oh, remember that the pillars of the nation are the children that we discipline today, that to give them a becoming education, you must rear them in a reasonable way. Let us guard them from the glamour of the mystics, who would throw a ray of sunshine on their lives. Let us feed each helpless atom on statistics, and pray heaven he survives. Let us cast away the out-of-date traditions which our poets and romanticists have sung. Let us sacrifice the senseless superstitions that illuminate the fancies of the young. If we limit our instructions to the reals, we may prove to every baby from the start the futility of cherishing ideals in his golden little heart. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The Cry of the Elders by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Nemo. With steady but increasing pace, the world is approaching a point at which the cleverness of the young will amount to a social problem. Already things are getting uncomfortable for persons of age and sobriety, whose notion of happiness is to ruminate a few solid and simple ideas in freedom from disturbance. Macmillan's Magazine. O my children, do you hear your elders sighing? Do you wonder that senility should find your encyclopedic knowledge somewhat trying to the ordinary mind? In the heyday of a former generation, some respect for our intelligence was shown, and it's hard for us to cotton to the fact that you've forgotten more than we have ever known. O my children, do you hear your elders snoring when the chassis of your motors you discuss? Do you wonder that your shop is rather boring to such simple souls as us? Do you marvel that your dreary conversation should evoke the yawns that lie too deep for tears, when you lecture to your betters about tanks and carburettors, about sparking plugs and gears? O my children, in the season of your nonage, which delightful days no longer now exist, we could join with other fogies of our own age in a quiet game of whist. Now at bridge our very experts are defeated by some beardless but impertinent young cub, who converts our silent table to a very Tower of Babel at the Knickerbocker Club. O my children, we no longer are respected. 'Tis a fact we older fellows must deplore, whose opinions and whose judgments are neglected, as they never were before. We may tender good advice to our descendants, we may offer them our money, if we will. Lo, the one shall be forsaken, and the other shall be taken, like the women at the mill. O my children, note the moral, like a kernel, I have hidden in the centre of my song. Do not contradict a relative maternal, if she happens to be wrong. Be indulgent to the author of your being. Never show him the contempt that you must feel. Treat him tolerantly rather, since a man who is your father can't be wholly imbecile. O my children, we, the older generation, at whose feet you ought, in theory, to sit, are bewildered by your mental penetration. We are dazzled by your wit. But we hopefully anticipate a future when the airship shall replace the motor bus, and your children, when they meet you, shall inevitably treat you just as you are treating us. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
An Epithalamium by Harry Graham, read for LibriVox.org by Carolyn. An Epithalamium. Longworth, Roosevelt, February 17th, 1906. Hail, bride and bridegroom of the West, your troth irrevocably plighted, your act of union doubly blessed, your single states united, with full approval and assent of populace and president. Let spangled banners wave on high to greet the maiden as she passes. See how the proud proconsul's eye grows dim behind his glasses. How fond the heart that beats beneath those pleated presidential teeth. The bishop has received his check, the final slipper has been thrown, with rice down each respective neck, the couple stand alone. To them at last the fates provide a privacy so long denied. Letters and wires from near and far lie thickly piled on every table, the peaceful message from the Tsar, the Kaiser's kindly cable, the well-expressed congratulations from heads of all the sister nations. Rich gifts as countless as the sand that cloaks the desert of Sahara, from fish slice to piano grand, from toast rack to tiara, still overwhelm the lucky maid with heavy duties to be paid. See, hand in hand the couple stand, the guests their homeward journey take, concealing their emotion and some lumps of wedding cake. How glad the happy pair must be that Hymen's bonds have set them free. Free of the curious yellow press, free of the public's prying gaze, of all the troubles that obsess the path of fiancés. Alone at last and safely screened from onslaughts of the kodak fiend, the bride who bore without demur the wiles of artists photographic, of vulgar crowds that gaped at her, congesting all the traffic, can shop once more in perfect peace without the help of the police. Arrayed in stylish travelling dress, behold with blushes she departs, the free republican princess, a captive queen of hearts. Captive to Cupid, need I say, but queen in every other way. And this must surely be the hour for Anglo-Saxons everywhere with cousinly regard to shower good wishes on the pair. Borne on the bosom of the breeze, our blessings speed across the seas. Hail, bride and bridegroom of the West! Pray pardon my redundant lyre. May your united lives be blessed with all your heart's desire. Accept the warm felicitations of fond if distant blood relations. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Self-Made Father to His Ready-Made Son, An Open Letter, by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Scotty Smith. My offspring, ere you raise the glass to irrigate your ardent throttle, ere once again you gladly pass the bottle, take heed that your prevailing passion be not completely out of fashion. No longer does the prodigal expend his nights in drunken frolic, or pass his days in revels alcoholic. For nowadays a glace de trop is not considered comme il faut. No longer do the youthful fall like leaf or partridge in October, for they, if anything at all, are sober. I mean the boys, don't be absurd, and not the foliage or the bird. No longer arm in arm they roam, despite constabulary warning, declaring that they won't go home till morning. With bursts of bacchanalian song and jokes as broad as they are long, no more they wander to and fro, exchanging incoherent greetings, the kind in vogue at Caledonian meetings. Behavior that we all condemn, especially at 3 a.m. Yes, fashions change, and well they may. No longer at the dinner table do persons drink as much as they are able, and seek the hospitable floor when they have drunk a trifle more. My nasal hue and carnadine shall not perhaps be wholly wasted, if sons of mine but leave their wine untasted, and vanquish with deserving merit the varied vices they inherit. Yes, offspring, I rejoice to think that, shunning my example truly, you never may be led to drink unduly. It is indeed a blessed thought. Now, will you kindly pass the port? End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Author to His Hostess, An Open Letter, by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Carolyn. The Author to His Hostess, An Open Letter. Very few English men of letters enjoy a desirable social position. To be sure, they are frequently invited to functions where they are treated with insistent affability by persons belonging to the higher classes, but the sort of position to be obtained in this way is insecure and unpleasant to any save those of adamantine cheek. Current Magazine. Dear Lady, when you bade me come to grace your crowd kettle-drum and mingle in the best society, when Melba sang and Elman played, and waiters handed lemonade, tempering music with sobriety, I never had the least suspicion of my precarious position. But now with opened eyes I leap to this conclusion shrewd and deep. What cerebral agility! Your compliments were insincere, your hospitality was mere insistent affability. And I, a foolish man of letters, who thought to mingle with his betters, ah me, how pride precedes a fall, that one who haunted rout or ball, when invitations were acquirable, should see himself as others see, becoming suddenly, like me, a social undesirable, invading the selectest clique with truly adamantine cheek. How proud an air I used to wear, when titled persons turned to stare. I blushed like a geranium, when lovely ladies softly said, "Oh, Duchess, did you see his head? What a capacious cranium!" Yes, isn't that the man who writes? I wonder why they look such frights. I used to bridle coyly when some schoolmate of the upper ten, they were not over numerous, would slap my back and shout, "By Jove, ain't you a literary cove?" as though 'twere something humorous. Those books of yours are grand, you bet. What? No, I haven't read them yet. But now I realize my fate, a stranger at the social gate, though treated with civility. The choicest circles I frequent must be the ones my brains invent, with fictional futility. The only royalties I know are those my publisher can show. The garden party and the tea are surely not for men like me. Oh, vanity of vanities, such entertainments are taboo, and might debase my talents to additional inanities. The poet has no business there. Que ferait-il dans cette galère? Ah, lonely is the author's lot, assuming, if he hath it not, a suitable humility. For when his daily work is done, he must inevitably shun the homes of the nobility, as with dejected steps he passes to supper with the middle classes. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On the Decline of Gentility Among the Young, by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org. On the Decline of Gentility Among the Young, suggested by Mr. Max Beerbohm. O youth uncouth, who slouchest by along the crowded public street, an eyeglass in thy languid eye, brown boots upon thy feet, a loose umbrella in thy grip, a toothpick pendant from thy lip. Much I deplore thy clumsy gait, thy drab sartorial display, so wholly inappropriate to this august highway. How can a man in such attire set any spinster's heart on fire? Thou art in dress no epicure, by weight of fashions overladen. Thy tawdry togs do not allure the soul of every maiden. They sound no echoing color note to her tempestuous petticoat. Her stylish skirt, her dainty blouse, are crêpe de chine or bombazine. Compare the texture of thy trous with their chromatic sheen. To what abysm of taste we reach by the observance of thy breech! Think what she pays her modiste for those hats of questionable shape, surmounted by a seagull or some imitation grapes. Small wonder she receives a shock every time she views thy billycock. Observe how, like an autumn leaf, the colours of the male canary, the garb of each New Zealand chief who woos his little Maori. The savage mind has thus designed a dress to please its womankind, and though I would not have thee go as far as primal man or beast, to lovely woman thou shouldst show some deference at least, and give a thought of what to wear upon the public thoroughfare. And shouldst thou wish to walk aright, let Mr. Beerbohm be thy mould, sedate, yet courtly, and polite as any beau of old. Yea, plant thy footsteps in the tracks of our inimitable Max. Enclose thy larynx in a stalk, as though afflicted with a fever, and in the place of billycock procure a bristling beaver. And practise, not, I hope in vain, the conduct of a clouded cane. If thou consentest thus to act, in scorn of popular convention, thy bearing shall indeed attract much feminine attention, as day by day, in brilliant hue, thy figure fills Fifth Avenue. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Lochinvar, with apologies to Scott and Swinburne, by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Scotty Smith. When the shadow shapes shone like a shaddock where the sunset had kissed them to flame, on his palfrey, the pick of the paddock, with his sword in its scabbard he came. In the glamour of amorous passion he would blaze like a seasoned cigar, and he fought in a similar fashion, did young Lochinvar. By the fences and fens unaffrighted, and unstopped by the stream in his spate, in a lather at last he alighted, and he knocked at the Netherby's gate. 'Twas too late, as he doubtless had dreaded, he perceived his particular star to a blackguard about to be wedded, did young Lochinvar. But he passed through the portal so proudly to the room where the gifts were displayed, that old Netherby called to him loudly, for the bridegroom, poor fool, was afraid. Is it blood you are bent upon shedding, with a murder this marriage to mar? Or to waltz do you wish at the wedding, my young Lochinvar? He replied, Though 'twere useless to smother my love for the maid at your side, though my Helen be bound to another, I shall trust to the turn of the tide. As I drink to her squint and her freckles, I'll remark how few ladies there are who would shrink from a share of the shekels of young Lochinvar. Then he pledged her in port so politely, though her mother lamented his taste, and she smiled at him ever so slightly as he settled his arm round her waist. When he drew her direct to the dancers, the Bohemian band struck a bar, and she found herself leading the lancers with young Lochinvar. Oh, the beauty and grace were so vivid of this perfectly parallel pair, that the parents grow purple and livid, and the bridegroom is tearing his hair, while the bridesmaids talk 10 to the dozen, saying, Goodness, what gabbies we are, not to marry our exquisite cousin to young Lochinvar. Then the girl by her partner is beckoned to the door where a charger they find. To the saddle he springs in a second, and he lifts her up lightly behind. She is mine, he announces, adjourning to the distant horizon afar. Till the cattle to roost are returning, says young Lochinvar. Oh, the tumult, the tumbling of tables, oh, the stress of the scene that succeeds, oh, the stir on the stairs, in the stables, oh, the stamping and saddling of steeds. But the bride has eluded them surely. In the room of some kind registrar, she is now being wedded securely to young Lochinvar. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Abbreviation's Artful Aid by Harry Graham. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Panama. Abbreviation's Artful Aid. The bard at times is stumped for rhymes without the least excuse. He can defy such moments by abbreviation's use, and gain the grat of friend or neighb without an at of extra labe. So simp a rule may seem pecule, and make the crit indig. What matter if the scans is diff, the meaning too ambig? The net result, lacon and punct, is worth a mult of needless unct. We long for sile from folks who pile their worldly pell on os, extremely knocks, and quite in talks. By their exube verbose, we curse their imp in manner drass, and fail to simp with their loquace. In house of rep, applause is tep for periphrastic Paul. Reviewers sniff at off prolif with semi-annual vol. But we can pard, however peeve, the minor bard who will abbreve. With pen and ink in close propinque, the poet lucky fell, avoiding trub, may give his pub the cred for some intel, and like an orph in pose recumb, in arms of Morph securely slumb. Let corks explode, with brand and sod, ye wearers of the mot, decant the cham, what mat the dam? And empt the flowing bot, and ne'er surrend the laureate's palm, his haunch of ven, and butt of malm. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Author's Aftword by Harry Graham, read for LibriVox.org by Larry Wilson. Now I have labored night and day, just like the hero of a novel, to drive the hungry wolf away from my baronial hovel, to keep the bailiffs from my home, by finishing this bulky tome. To such a trying mental strain my intellect is far from fitted, though if I had an ounce more brain I should be quite half-witted. And when I wander in my mind, I am most difficult to find. The sort of life for which I care is one combining peace and plenty with laissez-aller, laissez-faire, and dolce far niente. The heart of every bridge fiend jumps, dolce, 'tis sweet to make no trumps. I shrink from work in any shape, too clearly do these pages show it, but work is what one can't escape to be a minor poet. And critics I may well defy to find a minor bard than I. I ought to live out Frisco way, where working is considered silly, as Greeley Horace used to say, or was it Collier Willie? Go west, young man, I understand, go west and blow up with the land. Were I as full of zeal and fun as Balzac, who could drudge so gaily, or diligent as Peter Dunn, I might accomplish daily an ode of pleasure or of passion, in Ella Wheeler Wilcox fashion. But as it is, I sit and toil, consuming time and ink and curses, and pints of precious midnight oil, to perpetrate these verses. If writing them be dull indeed, alas, what must they be to read? End of Author's Aftword. This recording is in the public domain. End of Misrepresentative Women by Harry Graham.